Lieutenant Zara Stargazer Chen tried to steady her breathing as she stepped onto the observation deck of the celestial cartographer, the Galactic Navigation Academy's flagship vessel. The iridescent floor beneath her boots displayed a real-time map of the surrounding star systems, shifting and pulsing with gravitational data. She straightened her regulation uniform and tried not to fidget under the collective gaze of the 12 alien examiners arranged in a semicircle before her. "Human Chen," gurgled Admiral Zelvorath, his 6 eyes blinking in asynchronous patterns. The cephalopod's translucent tentacles manipulated the control panel with fluid precision as he spoke through his vocal synthesizer. "Your application to the Academy has been unprecedented. This final examination will determine whether your species possesses the navigational aptitude required for deep space certification." Zara nodded, keenly aware of the skepticism radiating from the panel. To her left, a crystalline Tholian examiner refracted light in what she'd learned was their equivalent of an eye roll. To her right, a gaseous Vurinax contained within an environmental suit emitted dismissive puffs of purple vapor. "We have prepared a standard Level 5 navigational challenge," continued Zelvorath, his skin shifting to a formal blue-green pattern. With a flick of his primary tentacle, he activated the massive holographic display dominating the center of the deck. The projection blossomed into a detailed 3-dimensional map of the Kessler Nebula, an interstellar minefield of volatile plasma storms, gravitational anomalies, and debris fields dense enough to shred even military-grade shields. On the far side, a small vessel identifier blinked urgently. "The colony transport New Beginnings has suffered propulsion failure and is stranded beyond the nebula," explained a willowy Xerillian examiner, her 4 arms moving in elaborate gestures that supplemented her speech. "Their life support systems will fail in approximately 15 standard days. You must calculate a viable transit route through the Kessler Nebula to reach them." Admiral Zelvorath's skin pulsed with what Zara recognized as smug anticipation. "You have precisely 1 standard cycle to calculate your route. The current Academy record is 6.2 days, held by navigational savant Grikelde of the Arithmith Collective." The other examiners nodded appreciatively. The Arith were legendary for their computational abilities. Their neural networks evolved specifically for complex mathematical modeling. A terminal slid up from the floor beside Zara, its quantum processors humming softly. The screen displayed navigation software so complex it made Earth's most advanced systems look like an abacus. "Your time begins now," announced Zelvorath. Zara glanced at the terminal, then deliberately stepped away from it. She reached into her uniform pocket and withdrew a carefully folded piece of paper, an actual physical star chart, hand-drawn and annotated with faded ink. From her other pocket came a small brass device that gleamed in the artificial light. "What is the meaning of this?" demanded a silicon-based examiner, his crystalline features rearranging in confusion. Zara unfolded the chart with practiced care, then held up the brass instrument, an antique sextant that had belonged to her grandfather, a navigator on Earth's early interplanetary missions. "This," she said, tapping the sextant with affection, "is how humans navigated our oceans before we had computers. And this," she continued, gesturing to the star chart, "is something my grandfather taught me to use when all our fancy technology fails." The examiners exchanged baffled glances. A few interfaces lit up as they initiated private communications, likely questioning her sanity. Zara smiled, settling the chart on a nearby surface and adjusting the sextant's mirrors. "I'll be done in about 20 minutes, she announced, glancing up at their dumbfounded expressions. "Anyone want coffee while we wait?" A silence fell over the observation deck, followed immediately by a cacophony of alien voices, translators struggling to keep up with the overlapping exclamations. "Preposterous. Is this some form of human humor we're not comprehending? An insult to our intelligence?" Dr. Flix, the assistant proctor, drifted forward in his gravity suit, his translucent bell-shaped body pulsing with bioluminescent patterns of agitation. Tendrils of neural filaments coiled and uncoiled within his gelatinous form as he addressed Admiral Zelvorath. "This confirms my earlier assessment of human psychology," Flix's translator intoned with clinical detachment. Subject displays clear delusional tendencies consistent with primitive species overconfidence. I recommend immediate psychological evaluation and possible quarantine of all human applicants." Zara suppressed an eye roll. She'd dealt with this kind of reaction since day one at the Academy. 3 years earlier, Earth had finally developed the warp technology that earned humanity admission to the Galactic Confederation. The subsequent cultural and technological exchange had been overwhelming, humans discovering they were among the youngest and least advanced species in local space. Yet one revelation had shocked both humans and aliens alike. When it came to intuitive spatial navigation, humans displayed abilities that bewildered the Confederation scientists. Zara had been selected as the test case, the first human admitted to the prestigious Galactic Navigation Academy. The Academy Dean, Zephyr Tau 9, had reluctantly approved her application, their crystalline body flickering with doubtful light patterns during the admission ceremony. "We acknowledge Earth's petition and grant this probationary admission," the Dean had announced, light pulses from their faceted body translated into speech. "Though we remain skeptical of claims regarding human navigational aptitude. The mathematical fundamentals of interstellar pathfinding require computational capacities beyond organic neural systems." During her 3 years at the Academy, Zara had confounded her instructors and classmates alike. While alien students spent days running complex calculations for navigational problems, Zara would glance at the stellar data, make a few marks on her paper charts, and submit correct solutions within minutes. Her methods were deemed insufficiently rigorous, and she was repeatedly accused of academic dishonesty. No one believed she was actually solving the problems. They assumed she must be using hidden technology or exploiting loopholes in the assignment parameters. Back in the examination chamber, Commander Erlthak slithered forward, his scaled body gleaming under the deck's lights. The reptilian alien's skull bulged unnaturally where calculator implants had been surgically embedded, pulsing with soft blue light as they continuously processed astronomical data. "This mockery has gone far enough," Erlthak hissed, forked tongue flicking out between needle-like teeth. "If humans truly possess such miraculous abilities, let us put them to a conclusive test." The commander's clawed hand tapped at a control panel embedded in his forearm. "I propose a formal wager, in accordance with Confederation scientific dispute protocols." Admiral Zelvarath's tentacles curled with interest. "State your terms, Commander." "If Lieutenant Chen can genuinely produce a viable route through the Kessler Nebula in under 1 standard hour," Erlthak's voice dripped with sarcasm, "humanity will be granted 10 additional seats at the Academy for the next enrollment cycle." Murmurs spread among the examiners. Additional human students was already a controversial proposition. "And if she fails?" prompted Zelvarath. Erlthak's lipless mouth curved into what approximated a smile. "Then humans will be barred from Navigation Academy admission for 1 standard century. Their species clearly requires more evolutionary development before attempting higher spatial mathematics." The observation deck's doors slid open as Erlthak spoke, admitting a small delegation of human observers, diplomatic representatives and academic advisors who had been monitoring Zara's progress. They'd arrived just in time to hear the proposed wager. "Lieutenant Chen," cautioned Admiral Zelvarath, "you are not obligated to accept these terms. This examination can proceed according to standard protocols." Zara studied the holographic display of the Kessler Nebula, noting its swirling densities and electrical discharges. She had been preparing for this moment her entire academic career. "I accept the wager," she announced firmly. The human delegation erupted in panicked whispers. Professor Marcus Rivera, her primary advisor, rushed forward, face pale with alarm. "Zara," he whispered frantically, gripping her arm. "Have you lost your mind? Their navigational computers are quantum-based, with processing capacities we won't achieve for centuries. You have a protractor and a star chart from Earth." Zara met his worried gaze and winked conspiratorially. "Exactly," she replied quietly, "and that's why we'll win." The observation deck fell into an expectant hush as Zara spread her star chart across a console, weighing down its corners with small brass weights from her pocket. She positioned herself before the holographic display, sextant in hand, and began taking measurements with practiced precision. "Lieutenant, your approach is unorthodox," Admiral Zelverath observed, his voice modulated to convey scientific curiosity rather than the dismissal of minutes before. "Would you care to explain your methodology while you work?" Zara nodded, not looking up from her chart where she was making rapid annotations with a graphite pencil, another anachronism that had several alien examiners exchanging puzzled glances. "Humans have been navigating across vast distances for thousands of years before we developed any computational technology," she explained, squinting as she measured the simulated angle between two pulsars. "We crossed oceans spanning thousands of kilometers, using nothing but the stars and simple tools like this sextant." She held up the brass instrument. "This measures the angle between celestial objects. With those angles and an accurate timepiece, you can determine your exact position anywhere on a planet or in space." Commander Rolthak's tongue flicked out skeptically. "Primitive celestial triangulation cannot account for relativistic distortions or gravitational lensing effects present in the Kessler Nebula." "Actually," Zara countered, marking another point on her chart, "those distortions create recognizable patterns. They're like signatures, fingerprints in space." She glanced up at the confused expressions. "Sorry, human metaphor. What I mean is that gravitational distortions aren't just obstacles to navigate around, they're landmarks you can navigate by." 6-year-old Zara clung to the gunwale of her grandfather's fishing boat, wide-eyed as lightning split the storm-blackened sky over the South China Sea. Rain lashed against her face, but she refused to go below deck, mesmerized by the churning chaos around them. "The GPS is fried, Gramps," her father shouted over the wind, gesturing helplessly at the boat's waterlogged electronics. Her grandfather, 70 years old and seemingly untroubled by the typhoon battering their small vessel, merely chuckled and took the wheel. "Then we'll do it the old way." Between lightning flashes, the old man pointed upward. "Look there, little Zara. See that gap in the clouds? What do you see?" Squinting through rain-blurred eyes, she glimpsed 3 bright stars in a distinctive pattern. "Orion's belt," she exclaimed, recognizing the constellation from the star charts her grandfather had shown her. "Good girl. And where is Orion in relation to the celestial meridian this time of year?" As her father frantically tried to restart the navigation systems, grandfather began teaching Zara how stars could guide them home, how natural patterns revealed secrets to those who knew how to read them. By the time the storm cleared, they had navigated safely back to harbor without a single electronic aid. "Remember, little Stargazer," her grandfather said, using the nickname that would follow her into adulthood, "no computer will ever replace this." He tapped her forehead gently. "The human mind can see patterns where machines only see data." Back on the observation deck, Dr. Flix had retrieved a neural scanner and was hovering uncomfortably close to Zara, his translucent tentacles extended from his gravity suit to operate the device. "Hold still, please," the jellyfish-like alien requested, adjusting settings on the scanner. "I'm checking for unauthorized neural implants or computational augmentations." Zara sighed but continued working while the scanner hummed around her head. She was used to these accusations. "Fascinating," Dr. Flix murmured after several minutes. "There are no technological augmentations, yet your brain's pattern recognition centers show unusual activity. Your visual cortex is processing stellar data differently than our reference models predicted." "That's because humans evolved as predator-prey hybrids," Zara explained, measuring another angle with her sextant. "We needed to spot both patterns that meant food and patterns that meant danger. Our brains got really good at visual shortcuts." The scanner beeped as Dr. Flix adjusted its settings. "These neural pathways appear to be standard in your species," he observed with evident surprise. "Not unique to you personally." "Of course they're standard," Zara replied. "Every human kid playing Connect the Dots is training the same brain functions I'm using now." She pointed to a swirling distortion in the nebula display. "See that spiral pattern in the plasma flow? Your navigation computers calculate each particle's trajectory individually, trillions of calculations. But I look at it and immediately see it's following the same pattern as water circling a drain." Zara traced her finger through the hologram. So, I know intuitively that if we approach from this angle, she drew a line, we'll get pulled in. But if we come in from here, she drew another line, we can ride the spiral's momentum to slingshot around it. Several of the alien examiners leaned forward, their initial skepticism giving way to genuine interest. That's not in our mathematical models, admitted a silicon-based examiner, crystal facets rearranging in what Zara had learned to recognize as surprise. Exactly. Your mathematical approach misses these patterns because you're processing individual data points rather than seeing the whole picture, Zara explained, warming to her subject. It's like the difference between analyzing each pixel in a painting versus stepping back to see the image. Zara continued marking her chart, adding annotations in a shorthand she'd developed that combined traditional celestial navigation with space-age adaptations. The alien examiners gathered closer, their earlier dismissal transforming into reluctant fascination. "What about quantum fluctuations?" challenged Commander Erdelthak. "No organic mind can predict quantum behavior." "We don't need to," Zara replied. "That's overthinking the problem. Quantum effects mostly cancel each other out at macro scale. We just need to create adequate safety margins." As Zara worked, Admiral Zelvorath circled behind her, all six eyes studying her methodology with intense focus. When she paused to check a reference on her personal datapad, the Admiral's tentacle slipped forward, seemingly by accident, knocking her pencil to the floor. "Allow me," Zelvorath offered, as Zara bent to retrieve it. With lightning speed, another tentacle darted over her chart, discreetly erasing a crucial calculation, the angular measurement between a pulsar pair that served as her primary navigation reference point. "Thank you, Admiral," Zara said, accepting the pencil back without noticing the sabotage. She returned to her work, continuing to plot her course through the nebula. Several minutes later she paused, frowning at her chart. "That's odd," she murmured, looking between her notes and the holographic display. "Problem, Lieutenant?" Zelvorath inquired with carefully modulated innocence. Zara's eyes narrowed as she studied her chart. "My pulsar reference angle is missing." She glanced up at the display, then back at her chart. "But, actually, I think I can use something better." Rather than redoing the erased calculation, Zara began working on a different approach, her pencil moving with renewed confidence. "The nebula's outer edge contains a distinctive formation of 3 neutron stars," she explained, measuring new angles. "They're radiating in a synchronized pattern that creates a natural navigational triangle. We can use their pulses like a lighthouse beacon." She completed a new set of calculations in less than 2 minutes, then traced a revised route on her chart, one that curved elegantly through the nebula along what appeared to be paths of least resistance. "This route is actually more efficient than my original approach," she said, a hint of excitement in her voice. "It saves approximately 6 hours of transit time and reduces radiation exposure by 14%. The human observers at the back of the room exchanged hopeful glances, while several alien examiners began quietly conferring, their skepticism visibly wavering. Admiral Zelvorath's skin had darkened to a deeper blue, what Zara recognized as the cephalopod equivalent of concern. With determined focus, Zara completed her final calculations, double-checking her work as the minutes ticked away. The observation deck had fallen silent except for the soft scratch of her pencil on paper and the ambient hum of the ship's systems. "Time," Zara announced, setting down her pencil with 5 minutes to spare on the examination clock. The observation deck had grown crowded as word spread throughout the academy. Additional alien faculty and students had filtered in to witness the unprecedented spectacle. A human claiming to solve in minutes what took their best navigators days. Zara rolled up her star chart and approached the main console. "I've completed my route calculations," she stated, meeting Admiral Zelvorath's compound gaze steadily. The Admiral's skin shifted through patterns of disbelief and reluctant curiosity. "Very well, Lieutenant. Input your coordinates for verification." Zara shook her head. "That's not how this works. My solution isn't a series of discrete coordinates. It's a dynamic route that responds to observable phenomena." She unrolled her chart on the console. "I'll need to manually trace it on your holographic display." Commander Urtak made a dismissive sound. Absurd. The nebula contains 317 distinct hazard categories requiring precise avoidance parameters. A dynamic route, as you call it, would be mathematical suicide. Perhaps for your navigation systems, Zara countered, but not for a human pilot following visual cues. After a tense exchange of glances, Admiral Zelbarath authorized interface access. Zara's fingers danced across the console, translating her hand-drawn route into the system. The holographic display of the Kessler Nebula illuminated, with a graceful, curving path that weaved through the chaos like a river finding its way through a canyon. "This is your proposed solution," Dr. Flyke's translator conveyed incredulity. "Yes," Zara confirmed. "When executed properly, this route will deliver a rescue vessel to the stranded colony ship in approximately 19 hours and 27 minutes. Commander Erlthak's calculator implants pulsed rapidly. Impossible. The minimum traversal time using optimal computational routing is 36 hours 12 minutes. Only if you're treating each hazard as a separate mathematical problem," Zara explained. "I'm treating the nebula as an integrated system with natural flows and patterns." Admiral Zelvarath gestured to a senior technician. "Run a verification simulation." The technician's appendages worked rapidly across multiple interfaces. The observation deck fell silent as the simulation initialized, all eyes fixed on the main display, where Zara's route glowed like a lifeline through the deadly nebula. The simulation began to process, then froze. Error messages cascaded across secondary displays. "System error," announced the technician. "Routing parameters contain logical inconsistencies." "Restart the verification protocol," ordered Zelvarath. The technician tried again with the same result. A third attempt crashed the entire navigation system, requiring a full restart. "The simulation fails because your computers can't reconcile my approach with their programming," Zara explained, stepping forward. "They're designed to calculate perfect mathematical solutions, but that's not how the natural universe works." She gestured to the nebula display. "The universe isn't a perfect mathematical construct. It's messy, organic, and often chaotic. Your navigation systems are trying to impose perfect order on natural chaos. That's why they take days to calculate routes and still sometimes fail catastrophically." The observation deck erupted in a mixture of outrage and fascination. Zara raised her voice to be heard above the commotion. "Humans don't have superior intelligence or computational capacity, quite the opposite. Our advantage comes from our evolutionary quirks." She tapped her temple. "We evolved as both predators and prey. Our brains developed pattern recognition for finding food and spotting dangers. We see connections and relationships intuitively that your logical systems calculate laboriously." The din subsided as the aliens listened with reluctant interest. "More importantly," Zara continued, "human thinking is slightly chaotic itself. We make intuitive leaps, we approximate, we use rules of thumb and visual shortcuts. In a way, our thinking mimics the natural universe better than rigid mathematics." Dr. Flicks drifted forward. "This would explain the anomalous neural activity patterns I observed. Your visual processing centers were engaging with the navigational data differently than our reference models predicted." "Exactly," Zara nodded. "We're not calculating trajectories, we're recognizing patterns, the same way our ancestors recognize animal tracks or weather signs." Admiral Zelvarath had been unnaturally still during this exchange, his skin cycling through complex color patterns. Finally he moved forward, his demeanor completely changed. "Lieutenant Chen speaks the truth," he announced, silencing the murmurs. "And I must confess something to this assembly." The Admiral's skin darkened with what Zara recognized as their equivalent of shame. "The Confederation has been experiencing an alarming increase in navigational failures over the past decade. Despite ever more powerful computational systems, we lose an average of 17 vessels per standard year to navigational errors." Gasps and murmurs spread through the observation deck. This information had clearly been classified. "Our perfect mathematical solutions are failing us with increasing frequency," Zelvarath continued, "particularly in regions of space with complex gravitational interactions or unusual electromagnetic properties." He gestured to Zara's chart. I interfered with Lieutenant Chen's calculations during this examination, erasing a critical measurement to test her response. Professor Rivera started forward angrily, but Zara placed a restraining hand on his arm. Despite my interference, the Admiral continued, she not only compensated but improved her solution using an approach none of our navigators would have considered. His primary tentacles performed a formal gesture that Zara recognized as a sign of deep respect. I believe what we are witnessing is not merely an alternative navigational method, but potentially a revolutionary approach that could save countless lives. Commander Erltak slithered forward, his earlier hostility replaced by scientific curiosity. How would we verify the viability of the lieutenant's route without simulation capability? Zara smiled. The same way humans have always tested new routes. Someone has to sail them. She stepped to the main console and keyed a series of commands. I've just transferred my route to the Academy training vessel Pathfinder. With your permission, Admiral, I'm prepared to pilot it through the nebula myself to prove the concept. A hush fell over the observation deck as Admiral Zelvarath considered her proposal. After a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, his skin brightened to a formal ceremonial pattern. Permission granted, Lieutenant Chen, he announced. But you will not fly alone. I will accompany you to observe this human navigational method firsthand. The announcement sent shockwaves through the assembled aliens. An admiral of the fleet personally accompanying a probationary cadet on an unproven route was unprecedented. If your method succeeds, Zelvarath continued, it will not merely fulfill our wager, it may fundamentally transform how the Confederation approaches space navigation. Zara saluted crisply, struggling to contain her excitement. Thank you, Admiral. When do we depart? Immediately, Zelvarath replied. The colony ship's situation grows more dire by the hour. As the observation deck erupted into activity, Zara caught Professor Rivera's eye. The older man gave her a thumbs up, his earlier panic replaced by unmistakable pride. Human intuition was about to get its ultimate test, not in a simulation, but in the unforgiving reality of deep space. 6 months later, the grand auditorium of the Galactic Navigation Academy gleamed under ceremonial lighting, its vaulted ceiling displaying a real-time stellar map of local space. Where once only alien species had gathered, now humans stood among the diverse collection of beings from across the Confederation. The integration had not been without challenges, but today marked a milestone worth celebrating. Attention for the commencement address, announced the Academy's Master of Ceremonies, a towering avian being whose feathers rippled with formal iridescence. The assembly rose as Admiral Zelvarath and Lieutenant Commander Zara Chen took the stage. After their successful navigation of the Kessler Nebula, completing the journey in just over 17 hours and rescuing the stranded colonists, both had become unlikely celebrities throughout Confederation space. Esteemed colleagues, honored guests and graduating navigators, Admiral Zelvarath began, his translator projecting his voice throughout the hall. Today we witness not merely a graduation ceremony, but the dawn of a new era in spatial navigation. His skin displayed the formal patterns of profound satisfaction as he gestured to the graduates seated in the front rows. A mix of species, including for the first time a contingent of 15 humans. When Lieutenant Commander Chen first demonstrated human intuitive navigation methods, many of us, myself included, dismissed them as primitive approximations at best, dangerous shortcuts at worst. Tentacles gesturing expressively, the Admiral continued. We were wrong. In the 6 months since the establishment of the Intuitive Celestial Navigation Department, mixed species navigation teams have reduced route calculation times by an average of 87%, while simultaneously improving safety outcomes by 42%. Murmurs of appreciation rippled through the audience. Today's graduating class includes the first formally certified intuitive navigation team, Zelvarath announced with evident pride, who yesterday completed the now standard Kessler Nebula transit examination in 3 hours and 12 minutes. A new Academy record, and 1/6 the time my own calculations would require. This last part he added with self-deprecating humor that drew appreciative laughter from the assembly. Zara stepped forward, her Academy uniform now bearing the insignia of her new rank and department. The once nervous lieutenant had grown into her role with quiet confidence. Our success comes not from abandoning computational precision, she explained, but from combining it with intuitive pattern recognition. Our alien colleagues provide mathematical rigor that prevents human overconfidence, while human navigators contribute the intuitive leaps that pure calculation might miss. She gestured to the graduating team. 2 humans, a Tholian, an Aritman, and, remarkably, a young cephalopod relative of Admiral Zelverath. Together, we're developing a hybrid approach that honors the strengths of both methodologies. The universe contains both mathematical precision and chaotic unpredictability. Our navigation should reflect that duality. After the formal ceremonial proceedings concluded with the presentation of credentials, Admiral Zelverath approached Zara with a small ornate box. The Confederation Council has authorized a new commendation, he announced, his skin pulsing with ceremonial patterns. The Stellar Intuition Medal, created to honor those who advance our understanding of spatial navigation through innovative approaches. Opening the box, he revealed a striking medallion, a perfect replica of Zara's grandfather's sextant, rendered in precious metals and suspended from a ribbon representing the spectrum of stars. Lieutenant Commander Chen, you are its first recipient. As he presented the medal, he added in a lower tone, "And to think I once attempted to sabotage your examination. The universe has a way of correcting our errors, does it not?" Zara accepted the honor with a formal bow. "Thank you, Admiral, though I suspect my grandfather would find this all rather amusing, his old sextant immortalized by the most advanced civilization in known space." Later that evening, after the formal celebrations had concluded, Zara found herself in the Academy's observation lounge with a small group of students seeking additional guidance. Most had departed, but one remained, a young Vurinax named Metsi, whose gaseous form swirled with patterns of concentration within their environmental suit. "I still struggle with the intuitive components," Metsi admitted, their translator conveying frustration. "The computational aspects are straightforward, but this feeling for patterns eludes me." Zara smiled, removing her grandfather's sextant from its display case where it now held a place of honor. "Let's try something different," she suggested, guiding Metsi to the vast viewport that offered an unobstructed view of space. Behind them, the lounge's advanced navigational terminals sat dormant, their screens dark. "Forget the equations for a moment," Zara instructed, holding up the sextant. "What do you see out there?" "Stars, planetary bodies, standard spatial phenomena," Metsi replied, confusion evident in their swirling form. "Look again," Zara encouraged, positioning the sextant. "See how these 3 stars form a triangle, and how that pulsar's regular flashes create a natural timekeeper?" She guided Metsi's appendage to the sextant, helping them sight along its viewing mechanism. "These patterns have guided my ancestors across Earth's oceans for thousands of years. They can guide us between stars if we learn to see them properly." For nearly an hour, Zara patiently worked with the young alien, teaching them to recognize celestial patterns and relationships that no equation could fully capture. Gradually, Metsi's initial confusion gave way to tentative understanding. "I think I begin to see what you mean," they finally admitted, their gaseous form pulsing with excitement. "It's like music, perhaps? The mathematics describes the notes, but the intuition hears the melody." Zara grinned. "That's an excellent way to put it." Metsi returned the sextant, their environmental suit expressing contemplative patterns. "But, Commander Chen, what if the stars change? Stellar drift alters these patterns over time." Zara took the sextant and gazed out at the endless tapestry of stars, thinking of her grandfather and the storms they had navigated together. "That's the point, kiddo," she replied softly. "Nothing stays fixed in this universe. That's why following the math alone will always lead you astray. You have to follow the changes, not just the constants." As Metsi departed with a newfound appreciation for human navigational philosophy, Zara remained at the viewport, her reflections superimposed over the starfield beyond. The journey from probationary cadet to department head had been as unpredictable as any nebula crossing, but she knew with absolute certainty that she and humanity had found their place among the stars. Not through superior technology or intelligence, but through that uniquely human gift, finding their way home by the light of distant suns.